Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real-time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Today's guest has built and sold 5 of her own businesses with an average return of 700%. She has served as a board member and an entrenched advisor for 36 startups and has invested in over 200 startups, including Google. She is the host of the Crack the Behavior Code podcast. She is a New York Times bestseller. Please welcome Christine Comaford. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Greg. It's great to be here.
It's awesome having you on the show. I can't wait to get into our topics. But my first question, we love endurance and the endurance mindset here on our podcast. Can you tell me, Christine, how the endurance mindset has impacted your life unexpectedly?
Wow. Without the endurance mindset, seriously, I wouldn't be here. Resilience, to me, endurance is resilience and the ability to pivot. And life throws all sorts of curveballs at us personally and professionally. And I think having endurance with a sense of humor, not like suffering through it, is essential.
Can you give us some examples of how that's come up in your life?
Yes. Oh my gosh. When I think of what it took to get my my job at Microsoft, it was the 1980s. It was a very male culture. I tried to approach as a female and it wasn't really working. So I changed my name on my resume to Chris and went through some channels and they actually thought that I was a man. And when they called to schedule the interview, I was kind of freaked out and I hadn't really figured my strategy out. I was like in my 20s, so I was like, oh, well, Chris isn't available, but I have Chris's calendar. So let me schedule Chris right now. I wasn't saying he, but I wasn't letting on that I was Chris. And when I showed up and they're like, you're a chick. And I'm like, yeah, well, why don't I crash Windows, show you where the bugs are and disassemble the code? And they're like, okay, well, we'll hire you, but if you suck, after 2 weeks, we'll fire you. And I was like, wow, that's so friendly. And I said, okay, game on, let's do it. If I didn't have that endurance mindset, I wouldn't have, took a creative approach, pivoted during the interview and just said, okay, if I suck, they should fire me, but I'm just going to rock and roll, So I just find that, in the endurance mindset enables us to, once we know what we want, to acknowledge rightfully that there will be obstacles. Mm-hmm. So don't get flipped out by obstacles. Say, hey, obstacles are going to come up. It's part of life. The question is, how well will I navigate them? How effectively will I navigate them? And just stay grounded and present when they do come up. So that's one example, but I've had like a zillion examples. I mean, oh my God. And we could go on and on.
Another one coming. Yeah, I was going to say, is another one coming to mind?
Yeah, well, I was thinking of when the bubble crashed, when the bubble burst and 9/11 happened. So I'm going back in time a little bit, but I can do more recent ones too. I was a venture capitalist at the time. We didn't have any ability for companies to have a public market exit because the markets were shut down. Nobody wanted to take a company public. Nobody wanted to do mergers and acquisitions. Nobody wanted to do fundings. So there was this pile of companies that were just going to die because they couldn't sustain themselves yet. They weren't profitable yet. They needed funding from somebody. They were startups. And I thought, okay, there's got to be money somewhere. Who has, and I calculated it. I calculated that we needed $4 billion across the US. I was like, okay, who has $4 billion? Oh, the government has $4 billion. I mean, duh. So why don't I just pass a bill in Congress and get the $4 billion and fund the small business investment corporations and everything will be fine. I mean, that's like a ludicrous thing to say, oh, just pass a bill in Congress. So I called up the North America Venture Capital Association, worked with them. They found a bill that was going through Congress anyway, where we could stick a little rider at the end, just a little small print and 4 billion, and just stick that little baby in. And it made it all the way through. And then it was vetoed by President Bush, W. Bush. But it's like, we almost got there, So that's just one example. Both my parents have died. And my dad died in 2003. And he asked, I'm a death doula as well. My volunteer work, I help people die, walk them through the death process. So my dad asked me to be his death doula. And I was like, can I do that? Because being a death doula is really intense. I mean, you're helping your patient release regrets, clear up unfinished business, guilt, shame, forgiveness issues. That's pretty deep stuff for your dad, But I just thought, damn the torpedoes, I'm good at being a death doula. I know how to do this. If he's up for getting that, open with me, let's do this, And then 15 years later, my mom got leukemia and she said, will you be my death doula? And again, I was like, wow. Okay. Yeah, let's do this. And both of them had really beautiful, peaceful deaths. But woo, that took some endurance.
Wow. And that's something for us to dig into. I'm curious, Christine, when did you first recognize this endurance mindset across your childhood? Like, when did it first come to you that you realized you had this superpower?
Yeah, I was 7 years old. Yeah, I remember very clearly overhearing. We're just going right in. Overhearing my mom and dad talking. Their marriage was not great. It was falling apart. And my dad was saying to my mom, like she failed somehow. Like I really wanted our second child, me, to be a boy. And like, I guess we didn't know yet that like the male actually determines, the gender. And I remember thinking, I was overhearing them and I was thinking, well, if he wanted a boy instead of a girl, then I'm just going to make my way in the world and find people who do want me. And I like packed in my Tang and my space food sticks. And I was like, okay, I'm going to run away. And so I was like heading out into the big world. I was waiting at the bus stop and one of our neighbors came by, Mr. Schick, great guy. And he just pulled over and said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm running away, And he was like, well, what's your plan? And I was like, I hadn't really thought it through, clearly, right? So he's talking with me. He was like so cool about it. He's like, well, what if we work on a plan and over the next few weeks or months, we figure out a really good plan and then you run away, but are you getting hungry? And I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of hungry. He's like, yeah, it's time for dinner. So why don't you take you home and then I'll be happy to help you figure out a plan. And of course the plan never happened, but he got me to drop the idea of running away. But yeah, so at 7, that's when I realized, you know what? I have value. And if people don't see it, that's okay. I'm going to find people who do. A little misguided in the whole running away thing. But I think that's when I really got that, if you want to make it happen, you got to make it happen.
Mm. It's a great story. You brought me back to my childhood. That's a whole other podcast. Christine, when we started off chatting, you mentioned endurance is resilience. Could you go a little bit deeper in what you meant by that?
Yeah, it's like the Japanese, how they say fall down 7 times, get up 8, It's growth mindset. It's, well, this didn't work, but I'll figure it out, I'll just figure out the next thing. Edison, 999 times almost discovered the light bulb, almost nailed it. So that's endurance mindset, right? Professional athletes, that's endurance mindset. There's this great video that I should send to you, but it shows you all the story, very short stories of all these famous people, and how they persevered. And we see it's easy to be confident after you've had a bunch of successes. The whole different thing to declare victory as you're stepping onto the battlefield. That's what That's one of the things that endurance mindset is to me. Of course, it's also you're running the marathon, you're exhausted, and you plow through, but I think it's the beginning and it's the middle when you're exhausted and, you're helping your parents die and you're like, I can't do this any longer. I'm so exhausted. I need to sleep. That's endurance. It's when you're connected to something bigger, because without being connected to something bigger, you're not going to have endurance. You're going to say, to heck with it. We've all bailed on things because frankly, it just didn't matter that much. Endurance is when your heart's in it.
Yeah, you're willing to endure to achieve whatever that outcome is you're trying to achieve.
When I work with leaders, in my executive coaching practice, I often will talk about three things. It takes courage. It takes courage. If you see these three words kind of stacked on top of each other, it takes courage to be able to do the work, the work of personal growth, the work of plowing through challenges, et cetera. But you're not going to have courage if you don't have commitment below it. If you're not committed to something bigger that makes it, worth all that blood, sweat, tears. And you're not going to have commitment if you don't have love. If there isn't something that you love, that you're connected to in your heart, you're not going to be committed and you're not going to draw the courage, because courage isn't like easy. Courage is like the stuff that shows up when you've decided to normalize the struggles of growth. It's like, oh yeah, growth. It's uncomfortable. Oh, well, and just make it normal. I think to endure, you've got to normalize the struggles of growth. And I can't stand when people say, oh, I'm going to be comfortable being uncomfortable. It's like, that's total bullshit. It's uncomfortable. Just say it. This is uncomfortable. And I'm going to do it anyway, because it's not going to be uncomfortable forever.
That's so well said. You got me spinning. I'll go back to my question. You also mentioned humor. You slipped that in there when we first started talking. And I haven't heard a podcast guest talk about humor as it pertains to the endurance mindset. I'd love to know what you meant a little bit more by that.
Yes, because sometimes when you are enduring, persevering, a lot of stuff goes wrong. And you can let it bum your high, or you can just see the humor in it. I mean, I think it's essential to be really curious, and it's essential to be fascinated. And if you can have curiosity and fascination throughout your life, you're set. And because that gives you the ability to have compassion, endurance, blah, 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 humor. And sometimes when I'm going through something really, really hard, I will look at what is fascinating about it. Like, it is fascinating that all these things are coming up at once. Like, that's kind of like, we should just have fun with this because it's so unlikely. And I think seeing the humor, I do believe the universe has a sense of humor. I do believe that everything happens to help us grow. I don't believe in victim mentality at all. I do believe that I chose every experience that I'm having. And humor is the ability to see what's kind of funny in everything. Because things are pretty funny if you look at them. Like, how likely that all these things would happen at once. How funny that while this is happening, this other thing is happening, like juxtaposing or paradoxes. But also you can inject humor, like when I used to deal with a lot of negative people at Microsoft who really didn't want a woman in the engineering team, I would I created this Star Trek thing where I would squeeze my belt and I would I would whisper, activate deflector shield, so you can always create a new persona. Like, I'm in a foreign land and I'm exploring their cultures and and how do they entertain themselves? Isn't that fascinating? And just kind of, I'll be out with my boyfriend, we'll be out having dinner. we'll look around the restaurant and we'll like make up funny stories about people. It's just important to have that playfulness, you know?
Absolutely. That's one of my wife and I's favorite game is, where do you think they're from? What do you think they do for a living? And
Yeah.
how many children do they have? And you just kind of, to your point, have that playfulness. How does that come up, this sense of humor come up with the executives that you work with when you're doing your coaching?
Um, yeah. One thing I really like for people to do is to have fun meetings. And the fun meeting, it doesn't have to be a whole meeting. It could just be a few icebreaker questions. And we always send everybody like a list we have a Google sheet of questions that we use. Um, and to find out to discover the humanity of your team. So like one of the questions is, and what's fun is you put it on a Google sheet or whatever, and you ask the questions and each person types in their answers so that everybody can see everybody else's answers. So like, what do you collect? And one person once said that they collect snow globes. And so, well, how many do you have? Over 1,000. 1,000 snow globes. Oh yeah. And I have like a whole room in my house dedicated to snow globes. It's crazy. That's so cool. A snow globe room. I've never met anybody who has a snow globe room. That's so cool. Now I know what gift I want to give that person, but it's got to be a really unique snow globe. Because if they have 1,000, can't just give them the average bear snow globe. So making sure that our people are curious and fascinated by their team members and not seeing each other as like working drones, but seeing like the humanity and the richness and the multifaceted aspects of humans, which is why, we do these retreats called Beyond Your Brain, where we bring leaders together, and not all of them are executives or just people who are interested in leadership. And we teach them ancient indigenous wisdom and, stuff from shamanism and American Indian ceremonies and stuff. And it helps people get really connected to the earth and the elements. And when we move through the world with this crazy, extremely digital world, and we are not so swept up in all the buzz, and we're actually connected to the earth and the elements, and we're feeling, water and earth and air and fire in our bodies as well, we are more connected. And if you look at what's happening in the US, which is why we need to worldwide, which is why we need to bring more endurance mindset, there's this loneliness epidemic, which is absolutely tragic. And it's because everyone's relied too much on digital devices for connection. Seeing humanity helps us see humor. Seeing humanity helps us experience that richness and that connection. And if there's like one thing that people take away from our conversation today, I hope they'll take away that, to start really being curious and fascinated by humans, because humans are fascinating human beings.
So taking that one step further, let's say we've got an audience member who's feeling lonely.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to her, to him?
Yes. Connect. So get out and connect with nature. Get out and connect with your community. Do some volunteer work. Even just doing one shift with the food bank where you're packing up bags and putting them in people's trunks as they drive up. I mean, I always send people off to do that if they're feeling kind of stuck. I mean, that's like a beautiful thing, sharing food with people. So hang out with a pet, get out and do a hike, go to an assisted living facility and hang out with some elders and volunteer just to, I took one of my friends who was pretty stuck once, and on Valentine's Day, and I got a bunch of flowers, carnations, because they're hardy and they aren't going to hurt anybody. They might have thorns. And she and I divided and conquered, and we went to all the people and said Happy Valentine's Day and gave them each a carnation. And to see how it lit these people up, and it really helped her have a shift. So it's get out there. If you're feeling isolated, get out there and connect. connect to history. You can connect to history. You can just like watch some history or biographies and stuff on Netflix, but history is cool because you go, wow, I live in this amazing country and look at what these people did to create it. So I wrote a blog for Forbes on loneliness. So if someone's lonely, they just type in Forbes Comaford loneliness or lonely. And when I posted this blog, within like a day, there were 100,000 readers. And I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, we should maybe attach it to the notes.
Yes.
And we should also attach that life equals risk. Here, I'll send you the link to it. And it has 12 ways to get reconnected. And you can just look at all the 12 and just pick one. Just pick one of the 12. I just gave you a couple of quick examples.
Wonderful. Yeah, that will be super impactful, and we'll certainly include that in the show notes. Changing gears slightly and into your work in neuroscience, how have you seen that play out in sports performance? We've got a lot of athletes that are audience members. The endurance mindset certainly fits there. And I'll give you a story. Right? My last triathlon, I started my swim, and I was 100% concentrated on what my finishing time was going to be 16 hours later. And then I realized, you know what? I don't need to worry about it. Like the day's just going to happen the way the day's going to happen. And so I kind of freed my brain of what's going to happen in the next 15 hours. And all of a sudden I have the best swim of my life. Like it was my fastest finish. The rest of my day was a little bit sketchy, but that's okay. So there's something there, right? There's something that connects your brain to your performance. I'd love to hear your insights on that.
Yeah. So here now, right? Every year we send out a stone and a process. Last Thanksgiving, we sent out Connect, right before COVID, which is kind of crazy. We sent it out during Thanksgiving. The year right before COVID, we sent out All As Well. Isn't that nuts? So anyway, we have a ton of these things. So here's the thing. Your amygdala does a lot of cool things, but one thing is perceives threats, tries to keep us safe, etc. And your prefrontal cortex is trying to have visions, regulate your emotions, say, I'm here, but I want to be there. What are the steps to get there? And it's like strategizing. And we also do have neural fibers, brain in our gut and in our heart. So your brain is way beyond just your head. And what I find is your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between whether you're doing it actually or whether you're thinking it. This is why so many athletes that look at Dennis Waitley's research run marathons in their brain, right? Get so normalize the struggles of growth, right? They get so used to how it feels to run that marathon and all their muscles are firing, even though they're just sitting at a chair. When we can be in the exact moment, we can be in flow. When we're in flow and we're surrendering any of the fear, any of the, limbic system, fight, flight, freeze, faint, because when we are thinking things through, we're either projecting into the future, projecting into the past, and we're not able to be here. When we're able to be here, we can get into that flow state where we have decreased cell density, decreased cell density in our amygdala, so it has less power, increased cell density in our prefrontal cortex so that we feel much more expanded. I bet you felt pretty expanded when you were doing that swim. Mm-hmm. And increased cell density in our hippocampus, which is where we have learning and memory and a lot of our emotional states. So the more present we can be, the more flow we can experience. And the whole thing is, it's just your ego that makes you want to feel small and scared. And when you look at a human being, the ego is one tiny fraction. We have all these rings that affect us, but in the mental ring, that's where we have the ego, the personality, etc. But there's a lot more that affects us. And the more we start to notice how much is affecting us, the more we can choose which rings, if you will, we want to come closest to us. So, Meditation is awesome because it helps us control the default mode network, which is the monkey mind. And even just 5 or 10 minutes of meditation every day starts to add up, and we start to find that we are quieter inside. The quieter we are inside, the more we experience flow, the more we can hear our intuition. So that was a long answer,
I
but
love it.
hope it
And you're
wasn't too rambly.
no, you're just spot on. And I love that we came to meditation because it's a big part of my daily habits. Um, any other daily habits that you recommend, Christine?
I think humans, we need to work out and we need to meditate every day. I just find that we need to move our bodies because here's the thing, energy gets stuck, energy gets stuck and we need to move energy. Emotions have energy. Emotions have energy. And, David Hawkins, MD, PhD, who is no longer with us, David Hawkins, proved that emotions have energy and we need to clear them out of our body so that we treat emotions almost just like wind moving through us. We don't want to hang on to regrets, unfinished business, guilt, shame, forgiveness issues, etc. We need to let them move. Exercise helps you clear out, if you will. So exercise, meditation, obviously. I think everybody should eat 70% plants. If you can eat 70% plants, you're probably going to age a lot better and feel a lot better. I'm almost 62 and I feel like I felt when I was 35, 40, I feel pretty great.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've got a great poster in my house, of Rich Rawls, and he's got a quote that says, "Mood follows motion." And if you think about it, like after you've been active, you're just in a different state of mind, but you got to get into that motion first, get out of your chair, get on your bike, go for a walk, connect with nature. Uh, Christine, I'd love to change subjects a little bit and learn a little bit more about you. How did you go from the 7-year-old who was exploring her new path and thinking about running away into Microsoft, into the work you're doing today? So give us a little bit more of the
Yeah.
patch.
Okay. Well, when I was 13, I had this big epiphany or spiritual experience where I felt like all this pressure and I was lying in my bed and I thought I was dying because I couldn't breathe. And I just said, okay, God, or whoever's listening, like if I'm dying, thanks. It's been interesting. But if I'm not dying, you need to understand what this is. I was a fairly precocious child. And the message I got was, this is the pain of the world. And I was like, oh my God, if people are feeling this much pain, I need to dedicate my life to reducing human suffering. So then and there I said, okay, I hereby dedicate my life to reducing human suffering. And then at 15, I went to this thing called EST, which I think now is called Landmark, right? And I realized that life has no meaning unless you make it, and we're all 100% responsible. Then at 16, I ran away and I did succeed that time. So dropped out of high school because it was slow and boring, negotiated my way into college early. Really what I found was I love systems. I thought it was software, but what I've learned that's more interesting is human behavior, but also consciousness. Those are like the most interesting systems for me. So after my stint of being an engineer, luckily, Microsoft had some troubles with the IRS and the EDD and needed to employ a bunch of people overnight. And I said, I'll create a business. Quickly went through Inc. magazine. Okay, 1-800 incorporate yourself. Okay, quickly, create a corporation. And then I started building companies and selling them. But what I found the whole time is it's all about the leadership and how people come together and how people treat each other. And if people are cultivating and elevating each other, and can people move power down and across the organization? So I retired when I was 40 after selling all these companies, and totally burned out, I might add. I did not totally manage my energy effectively, did not work out enough, etc. Took on too much stress. Um, but my dad, got pancreatic cancer, and I started writing all these stories to try to understand my life, like kind of memoir. That's Rules for Renegades. And after he died, it's like I couldn't stop writing stories. One thing led to another, got published, became a New York Times bestseller. Suddenly the phone was ringing and I'm back working. But I said, this time I'm going to help people intentionally create the businesses that they want, not burn out like I did, do it with more heart, but also do it with better systems. So my second book, SmartTribes, was all about bringing neuroscience into, creating the systems in your business that help it run. And then my third book, Power Your Tribe, is about emotional resilience and how we navigate, once we've got the business, how we navigate the human dynamics, because that's what it's all about.
Mm.
That's what it's all about. And I think people get lonely because they isolate themselves, because human dynamics are challenging. They are. And the more authentic we can be, which requires us to release defenses, which requires us to do gobs of personal work to find out where we're compensating, and where our fractures are, in our personality. As we do all that, we start to realize that, we're actually pretty cool, and all the people around us are actually pretty amazing. And I've helped 62 people die, and each one is different. And people are freaking amazing. When I see what people go through in their death process and keeping their heart open, or opening their heart if it's shut closed, people are just, you got to hang out with people.
Yeah.
They're like the coolest thing.
When did that calling come to you to be a death doula?
Yeah. Well, I started in 1998, so it's been a while. But a couple of things. In 91 and 95, I had two of my own cancer scares. They were benign, but as I was being rolled in on the gurney, to the OR, I thought, wow, I have this great support system, but what if somebody doesn't? What if somebody finds out bad news? Like, I have had this spiritual I was a Buddhist monk from 17 to 24. I forgot to mention that. Which totally made sense after the 13 experience and the 15 experience. But I'm good with my version of God, and I remember past lives, so I know that this is one of many. But people have a lot of fear of death, and how can I help reconcile that in whatever way a person wants? So I got my training. I got out there. I've been working with different hospices, for 25 years. And that's how I met the 62 people. And then a couple of family members are in there too.
Powerful, very, very powerful. And it connects back to your message at 13 of this is the pain of the world, right? That process, that ending process,
Yeah.
in itself is painful. Christine, talk to us a little bit about the Smart Tribe Institute and your One Tribe Foundation.
Yeah. We've actually renamed our foundation to just Smart Tribes Foundation, because we found that there's another foundation called One Tribe, and it's for military. So that's not us. So Smart Tribes, what we do at SmartTribes Institute is leadership and culture coaching workshops. And of course, this super groovy Beyond Your Brain retreat, which, take execs out into nature. And it's wildly transformational and cool and stuff. And we have a charter. There are 4 things that our foundation supports. Food insecurity, because if you don't have food, kind of hard to make everything else happen. So food insecurity, of course, death and dying, the environment, and I want to to just, I know people always approach us asking us to support their causes. I feel the vast majority, like we're starting these trials with ketamine for end of life, because when people come to an end of life scenario, there's three things that usually happen that are really big. They're either depressed, they're anxious, or they're having what we call existential dread. Okay. Like, oh my God, it's over. Where do I go? So for depression, anxiety, existential dread, what we have found is that some journeys with ketamine, which is legal, with an MD, dosing and administering, can remove or profoundly reduce those three situations. And as a death doula, the sooner my patient can drop in and accept the process they're in, the easier it is for them, for their family, for everybody. And if ketamine helps that happen sooner, hot diggity dog, So we're starting some research and trials on that with 6 different patients in the next couple of, and actually the first one's in about a month. So, yeah, I think if we just keep looking at where is human suffering, because with all the physical suffering that our patients go through, a lot of that these days can be managed. We're really good at managing physical pain, but it's the pain up here. It's the mental/emotional pain. And that was what I was feeling when I was 13. And a lot of it, here comes another stone, is remembering who you are. And if we can remember who we are, and each stone is on a specific type of crystal, this is an aventurine. All is well, perfectly, was on an amethyst, which is a healing stone, right? So everybody got all these healing stones right before COVID, which was interesting. And this just comes to me in meditation. I'm just like, do-de-do. Oh, here's the stone. Oh, okay. Here's the message. Okay, great. And I just like dictate it to my phone and get back to my meditation. So I get that I'm kind of like a low level order taker, from the universe. Yeah. And I'm totally okay with that. It's just like, okay, boss, what's up for today? Yeah. Okay. I'm on it. I think it's also
awesome.
kind of
Go ahead.
important to understand your role in the universe, Yeah.
100%. Are there ways that our audience members can support your foundation?
They don't need to, because we don't take donations.
Okay.
Because the way it's structured, it's called a donor advised fund, and Fidelity doesn't like us getting donations. But what they can do is they can go to Christine.com, and the very first button, you'll see a series of buttons if you want to connect with us. The very first one is a free self-discovery mini course. It's 4 sessions that are released to you, I believe, every week. And it's just a really cool way to connect to yourself, because the loneliness epidemic will only end when people are connecting to themselves first.
Mm.
That, to many people, is a little bit obscure, which is why I said, do volunteer work, get out in nature, connect with a pet, connect with elders, whatever, connect with your community. But we all need to learn the most important relationship to build. And when people start realizing that they are their beloved, and that people come and go, we hope that our loved ones will last as long as they do, but you came in alone and you will go out alone. Mm. So it's so important to just invest in building your relationship with yourself. So I hope you guys will go to Christine.com and just take that mini course. It'll get you started, it'll make a difference.
I'll be doing that momentarily, because you're really hitting a nerve with me. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Also,
come to beyond your brain.
Also, Christine, thank you for gifting us 50 copies of your book. For any audience member who is curious to read Rules of Renegades, put a note in the chat, send me a note directly. We'd love to send out a book of that Christine, her first book, and then you can subsequently buy her other 2. Christine, it's been awesome having you on the show. I feel like I could talk and go down different rabbit holes all afternoon, but um, your time's been super valuable. To the audience members who have got some value out of this, please like the show, please subscribe, please share this with your friends and family. I think the work that Christine's doing, the neuroscience, relieving pain, the pain of the world is really impactful. Let's support her journey so she can support our journey.
Thanks,
Christine.
Greg.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits